Billionaire wed a girl in a coma to fulfill his grandfather's will, then fate shocked them both. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new dramatic stories. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more meaningful content every week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The heavy rain had not stopped for 2 days. From the corner office of the 33rd floor, Ethan Hamilton stared through the glass wall as the city lights bled into the storm. A glass of untouched whiskey sat beside the last will of his late grandfather, a document that would soon decide his fate. The words burned into his mind. The heir must be legally married before the end of the fiscal quarter. Failure to do so will forfeit all inheritance to the next of kin. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. Married, he muttered bitterly. In 3 days, the empire his grandfather had built a hospital foundation, a chain of clinics, and half the Hamilton Corporation was about to slip away to his uncle, Richard Hamilton, a man with a smile as polished as his greed. When his lawyer, Mr. Gaines, entered the office, Ethan did not even look up. "Tell me there is another way." Mr. Gaines hesitated. "There is only one, Ethan. You must fulfill the will. Find anyone willing to marry you before Friday." Ethan gave a hollow laugh. "You make it sound like hiring a contractor." The lawyer sighed. "Without that signature, Richard will control everything, including your grandfather's hospital projects." Silence. Rain pressed against the windows like a ticking clock. Ethan's gaze fell on the foundation brochure lying open on his desk, a photo of Street. Clare Memorial Hospital, the last charity his grandfather had funded. Later that night, Ethan walked through that same hospital, his coat soaked from the downpour. He needed to think, to remember why all this mattered. As he passed the quiet ICU wing, a nurse called softly behind him. "Sir, visiting hours are over." He stopped. Through the half-open door, he saw her, a young woman lying still beneath the white hospital sheets. The monitor beeped slowly beside her. Her name tag read, Ava Coleman. A chart at the foot of her bed said, "Coma patient. No known relatives." Ethan stepped closer, the dim light tracing the pale calm of her face. There was something haunting about her stillness, peaceful yet alive. "Who is she?" he asked. The nurse shrugged. "A car accident 2 months ago. She has no family listed, but she is stable. We keep her here under the foundation's charity fund." Ethan's heartbeat thudded once, hard. The word foundation echoed. He turned to the window again, where lightning flashed across the skyline. "Mr. Hamilton?" the nurse asked carefully. But Ethan's mind was already racing. The will, the deadline, a legal marriage, a patient without relatives. He whispered under his breath, almost afraid of his own thought. If she cannot refuse, the condition could still be fulfilled. For the first time that night, a strange calm settled over him. He straightened his tie, his expression unreadable. "Prepare the paperwork," he told his lawyer the next morning. "I have found my bride." The next morning, the gray sky over Manhattan hung low, brushing the tops of the glass towers. Inside the Hamilton corporate building, Ethan stood before his lawyer, Mr. Gaines, signing the first set of legal papers. The echo of the pen against the folder sounded louder than it should have. His name, Ethan J. Hamilton, joined another Ava Coleman. Mr. Gaines cleared his throat. "The marriage can be filed under special medical consent, with a court witness and 2 doctors' signatures. But Ethan, are you sure? She is unconscious. You have never spoken to her." Ethan looked up slowly. "My grandfather built this foundation to save lives. If I lose it, the hospital will be sold to Richard's investors. I cannot let that happen." The lawyer hesitated, then nodded. "The ceremony will be private, inside the hospital chapel. Only staff and the notary will attend." That evening, the rain returned, fine and cold. Inside Street, Clare Memorial Hospital, the small chapel smelled faintly of candles and disinfectant. A few nurses stood at the back, whispering in disbelief. Ethan wore a dark suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his face unreadable. Ava lay still on a hospital bed rolled beside the altar, covered in white sheets, the heart monitor quietly ticking behind her. A silver wedding band rested on a velvet box next to the Bible. When the officiant began the vows, his voice trembled. "Do you, Ethan Hamilton, take this woman Ava Coleman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at her motionless face and, for a moment, imagined she might open her eyes. The silence pressed in around them. "I do," he said softly. The ring slid onto her finger with a faint metallic sound. It felt like sealing a deal with fate. Cameras flashed once for the legal record, and the chapel door closed behind him. Later that night, Ethan returned to his penthouse overlooking the East River. The lights of the city blurred beyond the glass. He loosened his tie and stared at his reflection, at the stranger looking back. "You did what you had to," he whispered. "This was business, not love." But the words did not settle. Days passed. Ethan kept visiting the hospital, partly to maintain appearances, partly because something inside him refused to stay away. He began bringing fresh flowers, reading business magazines beside her bed, sometimes talking to her about market numbers, sometimes about the weather. The nurses started greeting him with soft smiles. One evening, as he replaced the lilies on her nightstand, he noticed a small sketchbook on the table. Inside were pencil drawings, light, graceful lines of city rooftops, a cup of coffee, a girl's hand reaching toward sunlight. On the last page, unfinished, a quote was written in shaky script. "Even in silence, I dream." Ethan traced the words with his thumb. "You were an artist," he murmured. "A dreamer. What are you dreaming now, Ava?" The monitor beeped, steady and calm. He pulled a chair close and sat quietly, watching the rain slide down the window. For the first time, the air in that sterile room felt human. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Hamilton received the news. His assistant placed a newspaper on his desk. The headline read, "Billionaire marries, coma patient mystery behind Hamilton heir's secret wedding." Richard's lips curled into a thin smile. "So, my dear nephew wants to play the noble husband," he said coldly. "Let us see how long that illusion lasts." Back at the hospital, Ethan closed the sketchbook, unaware that the storm outside was only beginning. He leaned back, eyes tired but softer than before. "Sleep well, Mrs. Hamilton," he said quietly. "I will see you tomorrow." The monitor ticked once, then twice, and for the briefest second, her finger twitched beneath the blanket. The morning sunlight crept through the blinds of Ethan's office. The city outside looked calm, but inside him, a quiet storm had started to grow. For the past week, he had followed the same pattern work all day, then spend his evenings at the hospital beside Ava. What began as an obligation had turned into something he could not explain. That morning, his phone buzzed. It was the hospital. "Mr. Hamilton," the nurse said, her voice careful, "we noticed something unusual with your wife's neural responses. The doctors would like you to come." Within 30 minutes, Ethan was there, standing by her bed. The faint rhythmic beeps on the monitor pulsed faster than usual. Dr. Harris, the neurologist, pointed to the screen. "We are seeing increased brain activity. It might be a sign of partial awareness." Ethan's heart skipped. "Does that mean she is waking up?" "Not yet," the doctor replied. "But she could be responding to familiar voices. Keep talking to her, Mr. Hamilton. It might help." That night, Ethan stayed longer than ever. The hospital lights dimmed as the halls emptied. He pulled the chair closer to her bed. "Ava," he said quietly, "I do not know if you can hear me. Maybe this will sound strange, but I keep coming here because I feel like I owe you the truth." He exhaled slowly. "At first, this marriage was just a deal. I needed to protect my grandfather's foundation. But now, when I see you lying here, I wonder if fate is trying to teach me something. You are silent, yet somehow you have changed everything around me." His voice trembled slightly, but he kept speaking. "Do you know that the nurses talk about you like you are family? They say you used to draw everyone during your recovery sessions. I saw your sketchbook. It is beautiful. You are beautiful." The only answer was the steady beep of the monitor. But when he took her hand, the faintest pressure met his palm, barely a twitch, but enough to make his chest tighten. "Ava," he whispered, "if that was you, do it again." Nothing. Then a single movement. Her fingers curled slightly. Ethan froze. "Doctor!" he called out, his voice breaking the stillness. Staff hurried in, lights flared bright, monitors came alive. Dr. Harris leaned in, eyes wide. "She is responding to stimuli. That is impossible without consciousness returning." For the next several minutes, the room filled with the rhythm of hope and disbelief. Ethan stood aside, watching them check her vitals. When the excitement settled, Dr. Harris turned to him. It could take time, but this is progress. Keep doing what you are doing, Mr. Hamilton. She might be fighting her way back. When the staff finally left, Ethan sat back down, his pulse still racing. The rain had started again, faint against the window. He leaned closer and said softly, "Thank you, Ava. I do not know what will happen next, but I promise you, you will not go through it alone." Across town, Richard Hamilton poured himself a drink and stared at a photograph of Ethan shaking hands at a charity gala. "So, she is waking up?" he murmured. "That makes things interesting." He picked up the phone. "Find me everything about that girl. If she opens her eyes, I want to know who she was before this accident." Back at the hospital, Ethan rested his head against the chair, still holding her hand. The monitor beeped steadily, a quiet proof of life. For the first time in months, Ethan closed his eyes and allowed himself to breathe. The world outside kept moving, unaware that inside one silent hospital room, two lives had just begun to change forever. 3 days later, Ethan walked through the hospital lobby carrying a bouquet of fresh white lilies. The staff had grown used to his quiet visits, but that morning, the whispers followed him. People had read the headlines. The world now knew that the Hamilton heir had married a coma patient. At the nurse's station, Dr. Harris met him halfway, holding a file. "There is good news," the doctor said with a small smile. "Her neural responses are strengthening. She is moving her fingers and eyes more often. She may regain consciousness soon." Ethan's face softened. "Thank you, doctor. Keep me informed of every change." Inside the private room, the light was golden and calm. He replaced the old flowers, sat beside her, and opened a small book on his lap. "The media is relentless, Ava," he said with a low chuckle. "They think I did this for the inheritance. Maybe I did at first, but lately I find myself defending you, defending us." He looked down at her hand, where the wedding ring glimmered faintly under the light. "Strange, right? I married you out of desperation, but now I feel like I cannot imagine this place without you." His voice turned quieter. "I have been reading about you. You studied art at Parsons. You used to draw at the cafe near Central Park. Everyone said your laugh filled the whole place. I wish I had met that version of you." He closed the file and leaned back. "Maybe one day I will." As he spoke, her eyelids flickered again, just slightly. Dr. Harris's words echoed in his mind, "Keep talking to her." So he did. Every evening after work, he returned to that same chair, sometimes reading aloud from the newspaper, sometimes sharing old memories of his grandfather. His tone changed. It was no longer cold or mechanical. He started to notice little things. The way her heart rate steadied when he entered. The faint movement of her lips when he laughed. Even the nurses whispered, "She responds to his voice." One night, as the rain hammered the windows, Ethan stayed longer than usual. He pulled out the sketchbook again. "Do you know, Ava?" he said softly. "Your drawings are teaching me something. They are messy, full of smudges, but they feel alive. Maybe that is what I forgot, that life is not supposed to be perfect." He paused, smiling to himself. "If you ever wake up, I want you to tell me what those pictures mean." Outside, thunder rolled, and for a brief moment, the power flickered. The monitor beeped once, then twice, and her hand twitched more clearly than before. Ethan gasped and leaned forward, gripping her fingers gently. "Ava, it is me, Ethan." Her lips parted slightly. No sound came, but he saw the faintest trace of movement in her throat. He pressed the call button, his voice trembling. "Doctor, come quickly!" The team rushed in, checking vitals, adjusting machines. Dr. Harris looked stunned. "She is trying to communicate," he said quietly. "Her consciousness is fighting to return." Ethan stepped back, emotion tightening his chest. In that moment, the world outside the company, the inheritance, the lies faded into nothing. When the lights steadied again, Dr. Harris placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "She heard you. Keep talking to her. Sometimes love does what medicine cannot." Ethan looked back at Ava, her face peaceful under the glow of the monitors. "Then I will keep talking," he said softly. "Every night, until you answer me." He sat down again, the rain whispering against the glass, unaware that beyond the hospital gates, Richard Hamilton was already preparing his next move. The following week, Ethan found himself in a storm he had not prepared for. News outlets had turned the Hamilton Hospital wedding into a scandal. Every headline questioned his motives. Every interview demanded proof of sincerity. At first, he ignored them, but soon, Board members of the Hamilton Foundation began calling emergency meetings. His uncle Richard sat at the head of the table, feigning concern. "Ethan," he said smoothly, "the board is worried. The press is calling this a publicity stunt. Investors are threatening to pull funding. Perhaps you should step down until this blows over." Ethan met his uncle's eyes. "The foundation stays under my leadership. This was never about money. You know that." Richard's smile did not reach his eyes. "Then prove it. Appear at the upcoming charity gala. Bring your wife. Show the world she exists." Ethan hesitated. Ava was still in a coma, though improving. "That is impossible," he said flatly. "Then the public will assume you fabricated the entire marriage," Richard replied. "Choose carefully, your reputation or hers." That night, Ethan sat in Ava's room, the city lights trembling through the rain-streaked window. He held her hand, the hospital machines humming softly around them. "They want to see you, Ava," he murmured. "They want proof you are real. I wish they could see what I see." The next evening, the charity gala took place at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, laughter, and camera flashes. Ethan stood at the podium alone, a single chair left empty beside him with a small white rose resting on its seat. He adjusted the microphone. "Some people believe love must speak, must move, must breathe to be real. But sometimes love is quiet. Sometimes it waits." His voice steadied, low but firm. "I married a woman who cannot stand beside me tonight. The world may not understand, but she saved something in me that I did not know was dying." The crowd fell silent. Even Richard's smirk faded for a moment. Reporters lowered their cameras as Ethan concluded. "If you see me as foolish, that is fine. But this foundation, my grandfather's legacy, was built on compassion, not calculation. And I will honor that, no matter the cost." When he stepped down from the stage, applause rippled through the hall. It was not thunderous, but it was real. The press would twist his words, but for that night, Ethan did not care. He had spoken the truth. Later, he returned to the hospital, exhausted. The nurse on duty smiled as he passed. "She has been calm tonight," she whispered. He entered Ava's room, still in his suit from the gala, his tie loosened. Sitting down, he took her hand as always. "You should have seen it," he said quietly. "They wanted to tear us apart, but when I spoke about you, they listened." His thumb brushed over her wedding ring. "It is strange, Ava. I once thought this ring was a lie. Now it feels like the only truth I have left." The monitor kept its steady rhythm, and he leaned closer, whispering near her ear. "If you wake up, I promise you I will make this right. You deserve more than a name on paper. You deserve to live again." Outside, the city lights flickered as thunder rolled across the skyline. Ethan sat silently beside her, unaware that cameras from the press had caught his speech, and that millions of viewers were already reacting online, some mocking, some moved to tears. At that very hour, in another part of the hospital, Richard Hamilton met with a private investigator. "Find something I can use," he ordered coldly. "If she wakes up, she could ruin everything." Back in Ava's room, Ethan rested his head against the chair, still holding her hand, unaware that his words had already begun to reach hearts far beyond the walls of that quiet hospital room. 2 nights later, the city slept beneath a pale drizzle. Inside the hospital, the rhythmic beeping of Ava's heart monitor filled the silence. Ethan had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still gently resting on hers. The clock showed 3 in the morning when a faint movement stirred the air. Ava's fingers twitched. Then, slowly, her eyelids fluttered open. The light from the monitor reflected in her pupils, wide and confused. She tried to breathe, her lips parting slightly. Her voice was little more than a whisper. "Where am I?" The sound startled Ethan awake. He blinked, disoriented, then froze when he saw her eyes open. "Ava?" he breathed. "Ava, can you hear me?" Her gaze shifted toward him, unfocused but searching. "Who are you?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I am Ethan Hamilton. You are safe. You have been in a coma, but you are awake now. You are going to be fine." Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to move her hand. "How long?" "Almost 7 months," he said softly. "You were in an accident, but you are alive, Ava. You are really here." Doctors and nurses rushed in after the alarm went off, checking vitals, shining lights into her eyes, and asking simple questions. Dr. Harris looked astonished. "Remarkable recovery," he whispered. We need to keep her under observation for a few days, but she is stable. When the room finally cleared, Ethan remained. He sat beside her again, his voice calm and steady. You do not have to talk now. Rest, all right? Ava studied him, her brow furrowed. You said your name is Ethan. Why are you here every night? He hesitated, unsure where to begin. Because I promised someone I would take care of you. Someone? She asked faintly. My grandfather, he said after a pause. He started the foundation that funded your care. He wanted to make sure you survived. Ava blinked slowly, absorbing the words. Then, I owe him my life. Ethan smiled faintly. He would say, you owe nothing. He believed in giving people a second chance. She nodded weakly. Her gaze drifted to the wedding band glimmering on her hand. Her expression changed puzzlement, then quiet shock. Why am I wearing this? Ethan's pulse quickened. That is complicated. She looked at him again, confusion clouding her voice. Am I married? He swallowed hard, forcing a calm tone. Yes, but please do not worry about that now. Focus on your recovery. Her lips trembled. To whom? He met her eyes. To me. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. Ava looked at him in disbelief, too weak to speak. Ethan reached for her hand again, his voice low. I will explain everything when you are stronger, I promise. Later that morning, as sunlight spilled into the room, Ava drifted back into sleep. Ethan sat beside her, staring at the ring on her hand, wondering if he had crossed a line he could never undo. Across town, Richard Hamilton received a call from his investigator. Sir, she has woken up. Richard smiled thinly. Good. Then it is time to remind my dear nephew what happens when he breaks family rules. Back in the hospital, Dr. Harris pulled Ethan aside. She will regain her memory slowly. Be patient. Do not overwhelm her with too many details. Ethan nodded. Thank you, doctor. He turned back toward the room, watching Ava sleep peacefully under the soft morning light. In his chest, relief mixed with dread. For months, he had prayed for her to wake. Now that she had, he realized his truth was a double-edged sword. She was alive, but she might never forgive him. The news of Ava's awakening spread quickly through the city. Reporters camped outside Street, Clare Memorial Hospital, desperate for a photograph of the miracle wife. Ethan tried to shield her from the chaos, ordering extra security and forbidding any staff to speak to the press. But inside the quiet hospital room, a storm was already building. Ava sat upright now, pale but stronger. Her memories came in fragments, faces, colors, the sound of laughter, but nothing connected. When Ethan entered with flowers, she looked at him cautiously. You have been here every day, she said softly. I remember your voice, but not your face. Were we really married? Ethan set the flowers down. Yes, Ava. Legally, yes. Her fingers touched the ring on her hand. Why would you marry someone you did not know? He hesitated, the truth pressing against his chest. It began because of a will. My grandfather's last request required that I be married. It was wrong of me, I know, but over time— Stop. Her tone cut through him. You married me while I was unconscious? Without my consent? The color drained from his face. It was never meant to hurt you. I wanted to protect the foundation, to keep the hospitals running. I made sure you were cared for, and when you began to wake up, You what? She whispered. You fell in love with your own lie? He stepped closer, but she turned her head away, tears forming in her eyes. You had no right, she said, voice trembling. You took my name, my choice, my dignity. The monitor beeped faster with her rising heartbeat. Ethan backed away, guilt hollowing him out. You are right, he said quietly. You owe me nothing. When you are discharged, I will annul the marriage. Her voice broke. You talk about hospitals and charity as if that makes it noble. But what about me? I know, he whispered. I deserve your anger. A few days later, while Ava continued her therapy sessions, Ethan attended an emergency board meeting. Richard Hamilton sat at the table, smiling like a vulture. Quite the scandal, nephew, he said smoothly. Marrying a coma patient to inherit the company? The press loves it. Investors, not so much. Ethan glared at him. This is not about the company anymore. Oh, but it is, Richard replied. The board is voting to suspend your authority until further notice. On what grounds? Ethical misconduct, Richard said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photographs Ethan signing the marriage certificate beside Ava's unconscious body, taken by someone inside the hospital. Ethan felt his stomach twist. "You set this up," he said, voice low. Richard leaned back, smug. "You did that all by yourself. I only provided the spotlight." And when the meeting ended, reporters were already outside, shouting questions. Ethan ignored them, walking straight to his car. His hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel. He had built his life on control, yet everything was unraveling because of a choice he could no longer defend. At the hospital, Ava watched the news broadcast from her bed. The screen showed Ethan walking past cameras, his face grim. The headline read, "Hamilton heir under investigation for marriage fraud." Her throat tightened. For the first time, she saw not a powerful man, but someone breaking under the same storm that had once nearly taken her life. When Dr. Harris came in, she asked quietly, "Can I speak to him?" He hesitated. "He may not come back for a while. There are legal complications." Ava looked down at the ring still on her finger. "Then tell him I am not running away. I just want the truth." Oh. Outside, thunder rolled again, and somewhere in the city, Ethan sat alone in his car, wondering if redemption was still possible or if the woman he had fallen for would only ever remember him as the man who betrayed her. Rain fell steadily over the courthouse steps as Ethan walked through the flashing lights of cameras. The scandal had reached every news network in the country. Headlines called him the man who married a sleeping bride. His board had suspended him. His reputation was ruined, and the foundation was now under temporary control of his uncle Richard. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. The legal hearing was meant to decide whether the marriage was valid or fraudulent. Ethan sat at one table, his lawyer beside him, while Richard occupied the other, smiling like a man who had already won. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Hamilton, this court has received evidence suggesting you entered into marriage with an incapacitated individual. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Ethan stood slowly. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "Your Honor, I will not defend the legality of my actions. What I did began as an act of desperation, but it was never done out of malice or greed. My grandfather's foundation was at risk. I thought I could save it, even if it meant sacrificing my own name. If you must punish someone, punish me alone." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Richard leaned back, smirking. "Noble words," he whispered to his lawyer. "But words do not erase fraud." Just then, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. All heads turned. Ava walked in slowly, supported by a nurse. She looked fragile, her steps careful, but her eyes were steady. The room fell silent. Ethan froze, disbelief washing over him. "Ava!" She faced the judge. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge nodded. "Proceed, Mrs. Hamilton." Her voice was soft but clear. "When I woke from my coma, I learned I was married to a man I had never met. At first, I was angry. I felt violated, confused. But over the past few weeks, I have remembered things not from before the accident, but after. I remember a voice that read to me every night. I remember a hand that held mine when I was trapped in silence. That voice was his." The courtroom was still. Richard's smirk vanished. Ava continued. "Ethan Hamilton did not marry me for money. He married me to protect something his grandfather built for people like me, the poor, the sick, the forgotten. I owe my life to that foundation, and to him. What he did was wrong, but his heart was not." She turned toward Ethan, her expression softening. "I do not know if I can ever erase what happened, but I know I would not be alive if not for him." The judge looked at Ethan. "Do you wish to respond?" Ethan shook his head. "No, Your Honor. Her words are more than I deserve." The judge nodded slowly. "In light of Mrs. Hamilton's testimony, this court will dismiss the charge of malicious fraud. However, the validity of the marriage remains under review." The gavel struck once. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. As the room emptied, Ethan approached Ava carefully. "You did not have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to." He looked at her, unsure if he should smile. "After everything, I would understand if you never wanted to see me again." Ava held his gaze. "You were wrong to take my choice away, but you gave me back my life. Maybe it is time I decide what to do with it." She took a slow breath, then added softly, "If you still want to fix what was broken, start with honesty. No contracts. no conditions. Ethan's voice cracked. I can do that. Outside, the rain began to ease. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Richard stood under the awning, glaring at them. For the first time, Ethan did not look away. He reached out his hand not for ownership, but for a second chance, and Ava took it. The flash of cameras followed them into the rain, but neither cared. For once, every step forward felt real. 6 months later, spring returned to New York. The city glimmered under sunlight that broke through the clouds after weeks of gray. Inside the renovated street, Clare Memorial Hospital, a crowd gathered for the reopening of the foundation wing. A silver plaque on the wall read, "The Ava Hamilton Art and Healing Center, founded in honor of compassion." Ava stood near the entrance, dressed simply in a soft blue dress, her hair falling freely over her shoulders. The hospital staff, patients, and donors surrounded her. Her recovery had been slow but steady. Painting again had helped her regain strength, and the art therapy program she created was already changing lives. When Ethan stepped onto the small stage, the murmurs quieted. He wore no tie, only a light gray suit. He looked healthier, calmer, different from the man who once lived behind glass walls of guilt and power. 6 months ago, Ethan began, his voice clear but humble, I thought I understood what it meant to build something lasting. I believed it was about numbers, contracts, and control, but I was wrong. My grandfather's legacy was not about wealth, it was about kindness. I broke that truth once. Today, with Ava's help, I am trying to rebuild it. The audience listened in silence. Ava's eyes glistened as she watched him. Ethan continued, This center is not just a name on a wall. It is a promise that every life matters, and that even broken beginnings can become something good. He turned toward her, extending his hand. Ava, none of this would exist without you. You taught me that love does not need perfect timing, it just needs courage. She stepped beside him, her voice soft but steady. And you taught me that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to believe that people can change. A small ripple of applause began, then grew into a wave. Cameras flashed, but this time, Ethan did not flinch. He smiled, not for publicity, but because he finally felt peace. After the ceremony, they walked together through the new art wing. The walls were covered with bright paintings made by recovering patients' scenes of sunlight, open doors, and blooming trees. Near the end of the hall hung one final piece, displayed under warm light. It was Ava's painting, finished after her recovery. The canvas showed a hospital room bathed in gold, a man sitting by a bedside, holding a woman's hand. At the bottom, a single line of text read, Some vows begin in silence and end in forever. Ethan stopped in front of it, his breath catching. You painted this, he said quietly. Ava smiled. It is the only way I could say thank you. He turned to her, emotion filling his voice. Then let me say it back the right way this time. From his pocket, he took out a small velvet box. Inside was the same simple ring, polished but unchanged. No contracts, no conditions, just us. Tears welled in her eyes as he held it out. Ethan, he knelt slightly, not as a grand gesture, but as a promise. Ava Hamilton, will you marry me for real this time? The room went still. A nurse nearby covered her mouth, holding back a smile. Ava nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, this time, by choice. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and the crowd around them began to applaud again. Outside the tall windows, the sunlight spilled across the city like a quiet blessing. For the first time, there were no lies, no debts, and no contracts, only two people who had finally learned that love built on truth could outlast anything. As they stood together beneath the soft glow of the new center that bore her name, Ethan whispered, You once saved my heart without saying a word. Now let us spend the rest of our lives making every word mean something. And in that moment, under the light of a new beginning, silence spoke louder than any vow ever could.